Hello and welcome to the New Rules of Sex Summit. My name is Dr. Lauren Brem and I'm here today with Sheri Winston, celebrated sexuality teacher, award-winning author, and medical professional. Thank you, Sheri, so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yes, well, I read your book years ago, and this book, Women's Anatomy of Arousal, and I loved it, and I still love it today, and I wanted to absolutely make sure that this information was in the summit, because as a sexuality educator, I hear incorrect things all the time about women's anatomy of arousal and the G-spot and ejaculation and all of that. So I want to share this interview today with as many people as possible to get the truth out about the actual anatomy of arousal, and we can talk about men too, and we can talk about lots of other things. So I want to jump in today right there and just have you educate us about our anatomy of arousal.
Awesome. Well, pretty much my favorite topic.
Great.
Do you want me to just talk? Do you want to ask me questions or just go?
Just go. I mean, we can add some pictures with your interview, but you know, I have the picture I have right here shows the external clitoris and the internal clitoris, the crura and the vestibular bulbs. Why don't we start there? Because I think most women and men just think the clitoris is this tiny little external thing and don't realize what a vast network it is and how it works. So let's start there.
Awesome. Okay, so the first thing I think it's useful for people to understand is that when it comes to genital anatomy, people with penises and people with vulvas basically have the same amount of erectile tissue. Mm-hmm. Erectile tissue we mostly think of as associated with a penis because it's what gives the penis that amazing, impressive ability to go from small and soft to big and hard. Mm-hmm. And isn't it awesome that it does that? Well, here's the really amazing thing. Women have just as much of that erectile tissue as men do. So if we think that it's all about the head of the clitoris, that's the part of the clitoris that we know and love, and it's an important part of that network of structures, but it's like the tip of the volcano. We've got this whole network of structures, and if you added all that erectile tissue up, it would be the equivalent of a penis's worth of erectile tissue. Just that most of us don't know where it is, and so we're not playing with it and pleasuring it and utilizing it to its fullest capacity. I like to say it's sort of like playing the piano and thinking you've got 22 keys on your piano. Mm-hmm. You can make great music with just 22 keys, but oh my gosh, when you realize you have 88 keys and foot pedals, the music you can make expands dramatically. So I like to think of the head of the clitoris as the jewel in the crown, because we've got this network of interconnected structures. And the head of the clitoris is indeed the most sensitive one of those structures, which means it actually needs special care and attention, but it's not the only one. So as you mentioned, the clitoris has multiple parts. So the part that we think of as the clitoris is the head. The clitoris also has a shaft. And if we looked at the two of them together, the head and the shaft, it would look like a little tiny penis. Mm-hmm. And that is actually what anatomists were saying for many years was the female equivalent of the penis. They get one that's, big, and we get one that's this big.
Mm-hmm. No, I've been saying this in my courses for years, and that I think our movement back towards equality is also equal genitals. We have the same amount of erectile tissue, most of it on the outside and some on the inside, and we're the opposite, the yin-yang of that. So
Yes, exactly right. So what else do we have? Well, so the shaft of the clitoris, which is underneath the hood, is the second part of the clitoral system. And then the clitoris has two legs, like a wishbone. And they actually run along the bone, the arch. In fact, actually, I happen to have a pelvis right here. I happen to have a pelvis here, an extra pelvis, because I'm using mine. The legs run here and here along this bony arch. So that's the officially three parts of the clitoris. Mm-hmm. Then there are additional erectile structures. I also happen to have I happen to have my pussy pillow right here. And so now we cannot see the other structures, right? So we need to understand that they're under. So there's the head of the clitoris, the shaft is here, the legs are there. Then we've also got two big wads of erectile tissue. You were just discussing the vestibular bulbs. One under the labia on this side and one under the labia on that side. And what's interesting is they actually connect to the shaft up here, those bulbs. And the big fat part are on either side of the vaginal opening. So here and here. Nice, right? So these are essential. This was the first structure that I came across, that I was introduced to when I started what I then called my hunt for buried pleasure. Those are the first parts that I was already a practicing certified nurse midwife, gynecology practitioner, childbirth educator, massage therapist. I mean, I knew my way around bodies, and I had never heard of the vestibular bulbs until I read A New View of a Woman's Body, which made me go, the what? The who? I have what? So I went and I checked on myself because I own the equipment, and sure enough, I had these big wads of erectile tissue that I didn't even know I had. And so once I started playing with them, oh my gosh, sex got better, right? Easier, better, bigger, more arousal, easier orgasms.
So what do you recommend that women do to start to, or you know, partners of women to do to start exploring that tissue inside?
Well, I mean, there's two ways to approach it. You can approach it with a knowledge base first. Get my book or take the online class. Just even go to my website and read some of the blogs just to get an idea. So you have a mental map. I think it's useful to have that map first, and then go do your home play, right, on your body, on your actual body, and feel everything, look at everything. A magnifying mirror can be very helpful. I mean, you could use your phone and video, put it on a big monitor, and you don't have to post it to YouPorn or anything, but just to see. And then, and we'll talk about the other parts because we didn't finish. There's more. But then play with all the parts, get to medium level arousal, stop, look, and feel. Then play again, get to high level arousal, really take your time. Take a good 30, 45 minutes, which is what is kind of average for most women to get totally engorged. By the way, that was 30, 45 to 45 minutes, just emphasizing that that's normal. And then check it all out again. Look, feel. And then you're going to go, oh my gosh, she's telling the truth. That's all really there. Because you'll see it and feel it.
You'll see the
it's
fascinating because, again, we see with a penis how it goes from small to big, from flaccid to engorged. And then when you see that in yourself, and you can literally feel this tissue that has changed and color and size, it's incredible. It's really awesome and amazing. And I know, not just for me, but because I've had hundreds, probably more than hundreds, of women and their partners give me that feedback of having gone on that tour and just been blown away. So then of course, you also want to go for the other areas of erectile tissue, and to get to them, the easiest way is in through the vagina. So there's erectile tissue along the roof and erectile tissue under the floor. So if you were doing your own tour, you'd put your thumb in and push down. You probably put your thumb in anywhere from like an inch to inch and a half to find the erectile tissue in the floor. That's the perineal sponge. And then the erectile tissue above the roof. Now that stuff up there is what people are now calling the G-spot. I hate the name because it's named after Grafenberg, who was a man who discovered it. Right. And I just politically have this disgust, really. So what do you call it? I know some people call it the sacred spot. What do you like to call it?
I call it the urethral sponge. It's spongy erectile tissue, and it surrounds the tube of the urethra. And so the urethral sponge, in fact, when it's really engorged from the outside, you can see the end of the tube around the urethral opening. You can even kind of see when I made my pussy puppet, right? See this? So you can actually also play with it from out here.
Yeah, that's one thing I've
Yeah.
noticed about it too, is that though the stimulation feels good up the whole frontal wall of the vagina and that whole anterior wall, when it
Hmm.
actually swells that urethral sponge, it's right at the entrance of the vagina. And I know all of our
Yeah.
bodies are slightly different, and so
Yeah.
that exploration is so important. But I was surprised. I thought it would be a bit deeper in, but it's right there. And before ejaculation, you can literally see it puffed up, and then it
Yeah.
empties.
Yeah, you can actually, if you put your fingers in and kind of open the vagina up, you'll see it bulging down into the vagina.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so cool.
I love the power of information and how this like fills in this sort of gap, right? Because I feel like
Mhm.
it's been so important that we've talked about the head of the clitoris and the external clitoris and women's pleasure and and the importance of that. But then I feel that we've sort of lost this conversation about the other parts. And for those of us that really enjoy penetration and are saying, but wait, this feels really good to me too. And then this information makes that make sense. Well, of course, you have all of this erectile tissue, the front, the sides, the back, along the pubic bone. So when you're, grinding on something, like all of this tissue is getting activated, and it just like makes the light bulb go on. Like, oh, okay, no wonder that
Yeah,
feels good, and I can keep going into that feeling and into that play, and it makes sense. It's not like this just kind of dead zone. Like the vagina for a while became like a dead zone. Like, no, women
right.
get pleasure from that. They only have external clitoral, and again, that's important, but we have so much more.
You bring up so many good points. So the first one is that we have this whole network of structures, and including these internal ones that can feel amazing and awesome when they're stimulated. And we haven't even talked about the uterus as a player in arousal and orgasm, the layers of pelvic floor muscles, the anal structures. So there's a lot of pleasure to be had uh, in the whole pelvic bowl, in the whole wonderful collection of erogenous tissue. So that's important to understand. That moment, that aha moment, which for me, when I first discovered the vestibular bulbs, I went, oh, that's why it would feel good when somebody had their thigh pressed up against my whole vulva.
Mm-hmm.
That's why that felt so good. And then why a little later on, when the clothes were off, there was no more of that broad, diffuse, generalized kind of external vulva stimulation. My arousal would drop. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't understand why that happened. Once I understood the bulbs, I'm like, oh, because nobody was playing with the bulbs anymore because we didn't know they were there.
Yeah.
And we just didn't understand. Okay, so I get lots of aha moments from my students when I'm teaching this, because they go, oh, that's why that works. And also just as significantly, why it doesn't work. Because for most women, our arousal goes from the outside to the inside. And so getting the more external structures stimulated before there's any penetration is really key.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have what I call an epidemic of premature penetration.
Mm-hmm.
And that means we are allowing our partners to penetrate with fingers or toys or penises or whatever you come up with to penetrate with. I don't know, zucchinis, it doesn't matter. But if something's going in before all the internal erectile structures are engorged, it's not going to feel great.
Mm-hmm.
And so that also explains why a lot of women don't get as much pleasure as they could from penetration, because we're just going in way too soon, or we're allowing our partners to go in way too soon.
Absolutely.
Because also we don't have that understanding of how long it can take.
Right.
We don't know where all the parts are, so we're not playing with them. We don't understand the time frame that most women operate under or within. We also don't understand that for women, it's not just genital engorgement. We need to have that genital engorgement. We also need to get the whole body mind turned on. So when we are deep in our arousal trance, and arousal is an altered state of consciousness, a trance state. So we need to be deep in that trance state and have all the more external parts of our genitals engorged and our internal parts starting to engorge. And then penetration and playing with those parts is going to feel amazing. But not if you go in too soon. If you're in too soon and it doesn't feel amazing, it's too soon.
Yeah, and
Right?
the
Back out.
conversation has been you need to be lubricated. So women think, oh, I'm wet, but that's just that's the thing that happens at the very beginning with the vaginal sweating, and you have an arousing thought, and but there's this arousal journey, and I wonder if you could talk about. We see with the penis, it becomes erect, and if they ejaculate, they lose that. Can you talk about how that's different with women and how engorgement works as we, have external or different types of orgasms starting from the outside to the inside?
I'd love to. And I just want to emphasize that point you made. Wet does not mean ready for penetration. So please, let's get that information out there because it's just incorrect. Also, I will note that for women at different times of life, perhaps postpartum or postmenopausal, they might never get that wet and they might be really turned on. So wetness is not an indicator of either arousal or how sexy you are.
Yeah.
Okay. That being said, so when we get just the external structures played with, so the primarily the clitoral structure, really the head of the clitoris, maybe the shaft, it is primarily stimulating the nerve pathway that I think of as the external genital nerve. And we can get totally turned on and have orgasms just with that kind of stimulation. But they tend to be orgasms that feel a little lighter, a little more, fluffy is the word that I come up with. Those light, fluffy orgasms, they're lovely. There's nothing wrong with those orgasms. There's no bad orgasms. But they're just to me, they're like starter orgasms. They're like, great, now we've begun the orgasmic experience. When we get more of those structures online, our orgasms get easier, bigger, better, deeper, longer. And when we have the whole network online, that's what we really want, because then we get this cuff of erectile tissue, this interconnected, actually 2 circuits of an erectile tissue, overlapping, interlocking circuits. And when that whole network is activated, then we have that external nerve pathway and the more internal nerve pathway activated, and we get that most fabulous, expanded, blissed out kind of orgasm that is really deep, internal, emotional. It can feel spiritual orgasm because everything is online. And all women can experience that. It's just that the thing about sex and arousal and orgasm is it's made up of learnable skills. Right? So yeah, sure, there's some people who are just natural and they just do it, just like there are musicians who picked up a guitar when they were 2 and just started playing or sat down at the piano. Yeah. For most of us, if we want to learn an instrument, we have to learn. We have to practice.
Yeah, well,
and sex is just like that.
Yeah, and when someone's good at something like an instrument, ask any musician or dancer or anyone, and they say, I will never be done learning. I will never be done discovering new things. It becomes more interesting as I get older and I change. The subtle, I become more aware of the subtleties and things. So I love that even if you have found yourself naturally able to orgasm or whatnot, that there's still no end to the discovery of this buried treasure, as you call it.
Yeah, buried pleasure actually is what I call it. But and we're going to change through our lifespan. And again, just like a musician or a singer or a dancer, as we change, we have to accommodate those changes. And I say to myself, thank goodness I have these skills, because in postmenopausal, things really changed. And luckily, I have this big skill set and I've been practicing a long time. It made it easy to go, oh, that really isn't working so well anymore. Luckily, I've got a whole toolkit of things I can draw on and go, okay, now this works better. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And I think it behooves us to have a nice, deep skill set when it comes to sex. And that way we can really keep enjoying it for our whole lives.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting how that skill set serves you when you have different partners and when you're changing partners, and what works with one partner doesn't work with the next. And rather than giving up and going, well, I can't do that thing I did, you explore and you discover new things because you have a relationship to your body and understanding of your anatomy. this permission to explore. A question that was coming up as you were talking about the external orgasms, not only do I hear women talking about difficulty in general reaching orgasm, but I hear them talk about external orgasms that are short, don't involve a lot of pleasure. They're sort of like a contraction. What do you recommend for women that are experiencing these really shallow, lacking pleasure orgasms?
Well, to start with, I think our solo sex is so important. It's interesting. I had somebody come up to me and say, "Oh, I was in a class with you 10 years ago, and you said something that changed my whole sex life." I'm like, "Great, what did I say?" I remember. And she said, "You used the term solo sex." And she said, "That was the biggest shift for me ever. I started realizing that the sex I have with myself is real sex. It's important sex." And I think our solo sex is our learning laboratory. It's our rehearsal hall. It's our self-care center. It's our self-nurturing spa, right? So there's so many functions to our solo sex. So the first thing I like to say to people is your solo sex is really the place to start learning, experimenting, and practicing. Discovering all the equipment you have, learning what makes it happy, learning how to use your whole toolkit, your body tools of breath and sound and touch, or your mind tools of awareness and intention and imagination, and your heart tools of self-care and nurturing, and your spiritual tools, if they speak to you, of how to make this a sacred experience. So we've got all these tools, and our solo sex is a great place to start learning how to use them. And then within either that framework of solo sex or partnered sex is to slow down. Don't be in such a rush. We're in like, oh, we got to get there, got to have that orgasm. Let go of that. Play with arousal. Play with turning it on, turning it up, speeding it up, and then play with slowing it down, pausing, and run experiments and notice what happens. So when we take longer in the arousal journey, we build up more erotic energy. We turn on more nerve pathways. We turn on more of our brain. We get deeper into our erotic trance. And that's when we're most likely to have those expanded erotic experiences and the bigger, better, deeper, longer orgasms.
Yeah, and so talk to me about what's actually happening with the blood. I know we kind of asked it in dark track, but with the blood going into that tissue after you have one of those orgasms, does it completely leave? Does it hang out? What does it do?
Well, this is one of those fascinating anatomy things that as a total anatomy geek, I'm really interested in, because people have penises, have a time period where they cannot get hard again, right? Once they ejaculate, they cannot get an erection again, and that time will vary depending on if you're 16 or 60. But that refractory period is a thing for erectile tissue in penises. People with vulvas don't have a refractory period, and I'm fascinated by that. And I can give you my theory, but I don't actually know what has done any research. But the way erectile tissue works is that it's not just increased blood flow, but the blood needs to get trapped, right? Because like if you turn on your bathtub but you don't close the drain, it's not going to fill up.
Right.
So it's the blood flow plus the structures in the wall of the erectile capillaries. They're actually just modified capillaries. They're the tiniest blood vessels. And these structures act like valves, right? So as engorgement happens, there's increased blood flow, and these valve-like structures trap the blood. So in penises, what happens with ejaculation is all those valves relax at the same time. And then they take a little while before they can get activated again. They're like sleepy. They've like all rolled over and gone to sleep. So my theory is that in erectile tissue in vulvas is that the valves are not all coordinated like that. So some of them can relax and others stay closed. And so that can happen at all different times. So there's no refractory period, and we can just keep going and going and going because we can keep that engorgement as long as we want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's fascinating. And just as you're talking, I think about how much variability there is, like that I've had in my own experience, where some days like it's easy to open those and other days it's not, or sometimes some open, not all, or, you know, depending on like my mental state or, you know, how safe I feel or whatever, probably time of the month, all these different factors. And I've also seen so much variability in penises that sometimes after the ejaculation, they stay surprisingly hard, and other times they're gone in 2 seconds, and other times, even with older men, that refractory period is extremely short, and they go, I don't know how that has happened. And
you're like, yeah, so well, great. Yeah, I know. Isn't that fascinating how different it can be?
Yeah. But I think it is exciting to have a vulva and that complexity of all of that. And as you talk about it, I picture like all of these chambers that give us more, just more options sexually, because different parts can stay engorged, and like you said, this network goes all the way up into the cervix and the uterus, and all part of the contractions of orgasm into the anal area. And then let's talk about the urethral sponge a bit more. Female ejaculation is just such a crazy subject, right? People that are like, it's pee. I mean, I've heard gynecologists just stand up there and go, that is not a thing. And, you know, and anyone who has ejaculated goes, it is absolutely a thing. It is not.
I know.
So can you say it one more time so people can like get it through their heads? And read Sheri's book, because you have the best pictures, you know, you show the little,
I drew those pictures.
I love, this is one of my favorite things. I'm like, why was this not in my biology book in high school and midwifery school? I studied to be a midwife for a year. Like, I don't remember seeing that in any of my
Not there. Because it's not there. I drew those anatomy illustrations because they don't exist. Okay, so let's talk about female ejaculation. And yes, I just have this urge to go ejaculate on those people who go, oh, it's not real, it doesn't exist. I'm like, I'll show you. But they don't deserve that. Anyway.
I went to a demo, P.S. There is a woman who does female ejaculatory demos. Like, she brings a vibrator and her lawn chair, and she did it for a group of women. And, you know, for everyone, it's different, the amount and whatever, but hers squirted out about 3 feet, you know, the whole crowd went, and it was amazing to watch, because she was a very kind of tough trans. And I watched her, and it took her about like 10 minutes. And then after she ejaculated, she was this soft, feminine, like different creature. And around, and I was like, wow, look at the transformation of that woman. It was really fascinating.
Ejaculation is a powerful experience. I am so in awe of the experience. So, and I'll just preface this part by going that there are some women who are natural ejaculators. They just always do. They always have. It doesn't necessarily happen with orgasm. But for most of us who do ejaculate, we learned how to do it. And so I just want to emphasize it's a learnable skill. No requirement, don't have to learn, but you can if you want to. And it's worth learning because it is, as you described, a very sacred, transformational, intense, emotional experience. Really, when you have it with orgasm, it's an amazing enhancement of that. So what's going on? So the erectile tissue that surrounds the urethra, so we have this tube of erectile tissue that surrounds the tube of the urethra. And what's different about this erectile tissue is that it also contains glandular structures. Now, this is the same tissue that in men is the prostate. So some people have said we should call it the female prostate. I think we should change the name of the prostate to the male urethral sponge. Well, the female is actually the anatomical default setting, by the way. Right? And we all start out essentially on that pathway.
Yeah.
So anyway, just saying. So, and in the man or a penis-owning person, the prostate is also erectile tissue and glandular tissue. So in the urethral sponge, we've got little tiny glands that are like tiny little tubes, little tubules, and they're enmeshed in that capillary network. In the capillaries, the erectile capillaries. So you can think of the erectile capillaries are like the soil, and the tubules are like the hair roots of a plant, all enmeshed. And those little tubules empty into the urethra, right? The urethra is like the roll of paper, the cardboard roll in the center of the paper towels. So you've got all these little tiny tubules, and they have about 30 openings along the length of the urethra, and then 2 slightly bigger openings right at the where the urethra emerges from the body, either just inside or outside. And during engorgement, the capillaries fill with blood. They trap it in there. They get big and swollen and filled with blood. And then the watery part of the blood is mostly water, can actually diffuse through the membrane of the capillary, because it's only one cell wall thick, and that's what capillaries do. They exchange. That's their magic. And then the tubules are one cell thick, so the water can cross into the tubules, and then it mixes with the substances that those cells make. What makes it a gland is that the cells make something. They make some kind of proteins. And so now we've got these little tubules, like little teeny tiny water balloons, or like a little water sausage, a long skinny tubule filled with this fluid, which is a combination of water and the glandular substances. And then that's going to come out. Where's it going to go? Well, it's going to go into the urethra. Then from there, it's got 2 options. It can, if we don't let it out, we hold it in, it'll back up and go into the bladder, mix with urine, and the next time we pee, it would just come out. We'll never know. Or we can let it out, and then it's going to come out of the pee hole. It's body temperature. It's watery. I understand why people think it's pee. It's not yellow. It doesn't smell like pee. It doesn't taste like pee. In fact, you will love this, it smells just like amniotic fluid.
Good point.
Why? Because amniotic fluid is mostly water mixed with salts and glandular substances.
Wow, I never thought about that. And the healing power of amniotic fluid is incredible. Like a fetus can be like wounded and it'll just heal. Like we should be bottling and selling this stuff.
It's true. I'll tell you, the first time I was in the presence of another woman's female ejaculate, and I'd been a midwife for many years at that point, and she squirted all over, and that was before I had experienced it. And I was like, wow, that's real. And that is not pee. It doesn't smell like pee. It doesn't taste like pee. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it smells like that tangy, salty smell of the ocean or amniotic fluid.
Wow, I felt like
whoa,
talking about that.
Right?
Yeah.
So amazing. Now, I believe that fluid is there to protect the urethra from infection. Right? We all know that the urethra is a point where infection can enter the body. In women, because we have the short little urethra, right? Oh my gosh, it's right here. It's in Grand Central Station for bacteria, right? There's the vagina, there's our visitors, the anus is right here, and then we like rub it in. So of course women are prone to urinary tract infections. And the way evolution works is it tends to protect the body. So that's why we have parts of the immune system around every place else we have openings. Right? We've got tonsils and lymph nodes and adenoids, all of these things to protect our upper respiratory openings. But we've got this opening, the urethra, right there, where bacteria can get in. And the thing about a urinary tract infection, it isn't just painful and unpleasant. If that went untreated, it would ascend to the kidneys, and that will kill you. 2, 3, 4 days, you'll be dead from a kidney infection if it's not treated. You go to full body sepsis, you're gone. So it makes sense to me that since we have glandular structures right around that opening, that they produce this fluid that, besides it feels amazing. And I believe it's antimicrobial. I believe that that fluid is there to kill bacteria in the urethra.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're arguing that women need to allow this fluid to release and not kind of restrict and hold it back because they feel like they're going to pee because it's actually going to help keep this urethra tract healthy.
I absolutely believe that. I mean, the thing is that I think we all, whether we know it or not, are making at least a little bit of fluid if we get aroused.
Mm-hmm.
So any engorgement of that whole erectile system is going to make at least a small amount of fluid.
Mm-hmm.
But when we specifically make sure to get that urethral sponge well engorged, we're going to make a lot more fluid, and that's going to have a much bigger protective effect. And I can say, anecdotally, for myself and my clients and patients and students, learning how to female ejaculate seems to prevent urinary tract infections. And I myself used to get them, when I was a teenager, I got them all the time, and then through my 20s, I'd still get them pretty frequently. And I know other women who did. And guess what? Never any, no more, not since I learned how to ejaculate.
So what would you tell women? I know before I ejaculated, I just thought I had to pee and I would jump up from sex and go pee and come back, even if I had peed beforehand.
Yeah.
What would you, and then the way I learned to ejaculate was I wanted to, because I had a friend who was telling me about it, and I'm like, I'm not experiencing that, and I specifically got a dildo to stimulate that area, and I pushed back against the feeling, like I was pushing the vaginal wall back against it, and that was when it first happened for me, and then it sort of opened the floodgates, and I was able to experience it with different sexual experiences and with partners and things. I know sometimes I still hold back because it's such a, you feel like you're just letting go of your power. And, I've given birth as well. It's like this powerful thing that's going to come through you and you want to hold back. And I know sometimes I've gone to the shower or the bathtub because I feel like it's easier to play there than, feeling like I'm making this mess. But what would you recommend to women who are feeling that sensation, have never experienced it?
Well, I'll start by going, I don't always ejaculate. It depends on my level of arousal, engorgement, how long we're playing, mood, what's going on with myself or if I'm with my partner. I mean, so there's so many factors. And in fact, I had to train him that it was okay if I didn't ejaculate. It didn't mean I didn't have a great time.
Yeah.
Right? Because he was sort of like, wait, you didn't gush all over. I didn't do a good job.
Yeah. And then mid-love it. Like, can you do that thing this time? And I'm like, it's not on call. Like, I mean, sometimes when it happens, like, I'm not going to, yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So I think that's important to know. So the first thing is puddle pads. You've got to have puddle pads and just always have them down. And that way you will feel okay to let it go and not feel like, I'm drenching my bed. So for years I had toddler training pads, the flannelized rubber pads. I had little giraffes on them. I think I still have the first ones I had. I put a towel on top of that, and that's what I used.
Yeah.
It's funny. I remember buying them, and this other woman's going, like, how old's your little one? And I felt like going, I'm 42.
Which in LA, you would still have, you might still have babies at home. Yeah.
Yeah, but I meant they were for me.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Anyway.
You never know how much is going to come out.
No.
A little, it's going to be a lot. And
right. Anyway, so then I graduated because now there's a bunch of companies that make big, giant, pads that have, silky on one side and flannelly, plush on the other, and they're waterproof, and you throw them in the washing machine. So I've got all kinds of different pads now that you can buy. But whether you go the cheapo route or you get a little more deluxe, just always put them down. And that way you really will feel free, because mentally, we have to let go mentally.
Yeah.
Then exactly what you were talking about, stimulation of that urethral sponge. Now, ideally doing it when you are already deeply in your arousal trance, when all the rest of the more external structures are nice and big and juicy and engorged. And then attention to the urethral sponge. I think it also helps actually to stimulate the perineal sponge, the one underneath, get the whole network activated. And then what you're talking about is using your pelvic floor muscles, breath, and sound. And I bet you were making sound too, even though you didn't mention it. But it's that, when you get to that point where you're about to have your orgasm and you've gotten the tissue really juicy. I mean, that tissue gets not just engorged, but it starts feeling almost boggy. Like it feels like it's filled with fluid. Like you can feel that texture. And at that point, as you start having your orgasm, bear down, open, push out like you're pushing out a baby or a poop, but more in the front, and make sound and go, like let the sound out, because this end is connected to that end. And if you got your puddle pads down and your partner, if you're with a partner, is egging you on, let it go, baby, I love it, bring it on, whatever. Not in a pressuring way, but in an encouraging way. And then sooner or later, when let go of the pressure, because if you're like going like, I have to do this, it's less likely to happen. And if you just keep setting it up like that, sooner or later you'll gush.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. All the same things. So great. So we covered a lot of the female anatomy, or the vulva anatomy of arousal. Do you want to just say, and you talked about renaming the prostate as the what did you call it?
The male urethral sponge.
Male urethral
like, let's name something in the male body after the female body for a change.
Yeah, I love that. Is there anything else you want to say about the male anatomy of arousal that?
Oh dear. Here we're going to get into some territory that is probably the most charged topic I speak about, and that is the foreskin.
Oh, okay.
So, penises. The way that people who have penises are born is with an intact penile system, and that includes the foreskin. And we are very, very confused in the United States about foreskins. We think it's Mother Nature's doily, just some little flap of skin that they just threw on there, and it's just old-fashioned and it gets dirty, and we should just get rid of it. Get be all modern and streamlined. The truth is the foreskin is an important and integral part of the penile system. It contains the most sensitive nerve endings in the male genitalia. It contains the main orgasmic triggers. It creates its own ecosystem. There's about 15 other functions of the foreskin, which I won't go into in detail. But when we remove the foreskin, we are removing the sliding skin system. So the foreskin is, if we imagine, how the skin of a penis has that ability to slide. So if you imagine, if you've only ever experienced circumcised penises, you can imagine if that skin continued and then folded over itself. And I don't have my teaching penis here. I have a teaching penis, but it's not handy. But so the penis is designed to slide within its own skin system. And the nerve endings in there, the super sensitive nerve endings, there's also nerve endings specially designed to respond to that stretching. And those are the main orgasmic triggers. So what we're doing when we remove it is, well, first of all, and again, undoubtedly going to tweak some people here. I believe that that's a sexual assault against the bodily integrity of that baby. I believe we have a right to an intact body. Now, of course, if your kid has appendicitis, you're going to take their appendix out or treat it in some way. But to remove a perfectly healthy and I think integral part of their genitals for no good reason, and that's a whole other set of arguments, but for no good reason, is a human rights violation. And I think we should just absolutely stop. There is just, I get very worked up on this one. There's just no excuse for doing that. And so I believe circumcised men, even though they may not remember the assault that occurred to their genitals, have experienced that. And the circumcision is the equivalent of a second-degree female circumcision. So we're appalled that some cultures and countries in this world do a genital mutilation of female genitalia, and there's 4 levels of that.
Yeah.
When we do a circumcision or a foreskin amputation on a male penis, we are removing the equivalent amount of tissue to a second degree female genital surgery. Mm-hmm. So it's about a quarter of the skin and the nerve endings on the penis, if not more. Yeah. So this is a big one for me. Now, that being said, we all have this wonderful plastic brain and lots of different tools in our toolkit, so we can all have amazing degrees of pleasure, even if we've had surgery to our genitals, even if we've had parts removed. I know somebody who's paralyzed from the chest down who still has orgasms, right? Yeah. So we're amazing. So I don't want people who have penises who have been circumcised to feel like they're broken. No, we're not broken. Whatever happened to us. We've all been on these life journeys and stuff happened. And you can learn how to use all the equipment you have to have amazing pleasure. Mm-hmm. However, I would like us to stop doing this to babies now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I hear that it's often the men or the women, it's just for aesthetic reasons that they continue to do it. Oh, I want my son's penis to look like mine. Or, oh, I think uncircumcised penises look gross, say the woman. And when people have to realize there's absolutely no health benefit. This came out of the anti-masturbation movement. For a long time, we circumcised boys to get them to stop touching their genitals. And
that didn't work, did it?
Well, for a while, because it hurt to touch your penis after you have this assault done to it. But it's absolutely, it's there luckily are, I see at least here in LA, a lot of mothers choosing not to do it and recognizing the intact body and the violation that it is. So hopefully this trend continues away from this horrible practice.
Well, if you'd asked me 30 years ago when I first started working in the field of childbirth, I would have said that 30 years from now, hardly anyone's going to do it. People will have stopped doing it. People will have realized. And now it's 30 years later, it hasn't actually changed that much. So what I do understand now is it's a deep thing. It's a deep, deep thing. And it's about feelings and beliefs. And it isn't just about facts, because facts don't sway anybody. We have to start addressing what are the feelings that are going on. What is the need for cultural belonging, or claiming kinship? I mean, we've got to start looking at those deeper need systems if we're going to try and change it.
Right. Well, that's what we see with female circumcision too. The women say,
exactly.
Part of it is like, well, this was done to me, so I'm going to do it to the next one. Or the person isn't desirable if not. And cultural norms about beauty and desirability, attractiveness, is so basic to us to need the world to find us attractive, so we can be loved, we can be safe, we can belong. That base chakra stuff. That's powerful as social creatures. So
Anyway, and I just want to note that I know that this is going to get a big response from people, either positive or negative, but nobody's going to be just like, oh, whatever. People are going to have a very strong response one way or another. And I just want to acknowledge that this conversation is very triggering for people. Very triggering for people who've had this procedure done to them, very triggering for people who've chosen to do it to their children. And so I kind of want to honor and acknowledge that this is a painful topic, and it's not my intention to cause pain for people. It is my intention to try and prevent harm going forward.
Yeah, makes sense. So talk to me a bit more. We've now talked about the foreskin and the prostate. Do you want to say a bit more about the anus or the testes or the perineum of men?
Well, I mean, I think the same way women have a whole network of structures, so do penis owners. And we can get so focused on the part of the penis that sort of sticks out from the body that we forget that not only is there that part, but there's a whole nother quarter to a third of penis that's attached, and underneath and behind the balls themselves, the prostate gland, which is its own powerhouse of pleasure. And then for people of whatever plumbing you have, everyone has an anus. And so we have all this potentially pleasurable equipment, much of which we're not making full use of, because the anus, for example, we have all these taboos and a lot of shame around it. And so I really want to invite people to start learning about all the equipment they have, all the equipment their partner has, and then figuring out, do we want to explore? Do I want to explore this by myself? Then do I want to bring it to my partner play? And find all the pleasure that you've got, not to mention the whole rest of your body. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're just so focused on selected parts of the genitals that we're missing so much of the pleasure experience because we're not utilizing all of the equipment.
Yeah, and scared to look at it. I mean, I talk to women who are pregnant, about to give birth, or have given birth, or people of, you know, whatever, in whatever stage of life, and they've never penetrated themselves with a finger, their vagina, their anus. You know, they're just, it's like they're scared to even go there. And we sort of have this joke, like, you get a mirror and look at it, but I think it, you know, some really safe places to explore your body are not only creating time for solo sex in bed, but in the shower, in the bathtub, you know, where it's safe to go slow, and you have a sense of safety because whatever happens, whatever comes out of your body is kind of safe in those places, and you can explore. So when you are with a partner, you've sort of flushed out these ideas that your body is dirty or gross or shameful in a way. Like, you're just really familiar and comfortable with it because of your exploration.
And it's a process. And we can go slow, we can take our time. We also can do some reprogramming in our brains around the shame, because that's huge, the body shame that we have. And start really liberating ourselves, and deeply liberating ourselves by loving all the parts of our body and discovering all the pleasure potential we have, and having that ownership. I know that, you know, for years I would talk to women about vaginal health in my practice or in a class, and I would say, well, it's good. Stick your finger in, take it out, look at your discharge. And women would be like, ew. And it's yours. Like, what? Like, really?
You pick your nose. Like, you pick your nose. You
right?
Finger in there to get a piece of food stuck in your teeth out.
Exactly.
Dirtier than our anus, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
So, if you want to do anal play, put on a glove. Get a box of nitrile gloves and some lube, a condom or a finger cot, and I love gloves for anal play because you do want to be respectful of the anal bacteria. You don't want getting them in the vagina, around your urethra, or in your mouth.
Yeah.
That's one of my porn pet peeves, when they do anal play and then they take whatever they use and they stick it in the mouth or the vagina. I'm like, no, healthcare professional alert. Like, don't do that. Yeah. But put on a glove or a condom or whatever, put on something. And then after you're done with the anal play, just take it off, and then your parts are clean, So there's easy ways to make it safe.
Yeah.
And more fun. And of course with lots of lube. Yeah. So in terms of the pleasure potential in our bodies, our genitals are sort of number one on the hit parade, the most innervated parts of our bodies. Number two is the anus and anal area. So if you're not using yours, you are missing out on a huge amount of potential pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Well, we don't have too much time left, but I do want you to just touch on your holistic sexuality curriculum and just kind of what that is. And you use this term orgasmic abundance that I really liked when I was reading about that. So maybe just a minute or two on what that is.
I would be happy to. In fact, my giveaway for your listeners is a Hergasmic Abundance online class.
Oh, cool.
So that's a freebie for your listeners that they can get. But basically, it's the idea that we all have this potential. And by the way, people, penis owners have it too. The class I'm giving away is focused on women's orgasm, but almost everything in it applies to men as well. But we all can learn. We can develop skills. We can become what I call an erotic virtuoso. And just like learning how to play an instrument, there's skill sets, the simple skills and more complex skills, and we've got all these different abilities and tools we can learn how to use, and everyone has the potential to have amazing sex. intense, deep arousal trances, lots and lots of orgasms. And I will mention, by the way, I know we have like this super medicated culture, and a lot of the medications for depression and anxiety. Well, one of the best cures for depression and anxiety is orgasms. Lots of orgasms.
I've been
and
that. Yeah.
Right? No bad side effects.
Yeah. Well, and it actually, yeah, and I think it's so interesting how much, regular sex and orgasm and that whole thing that happens, like how it lifts your mood so much. And I've used that a lot as someone who struggles with depression. But I also think it's so fascinating, all the research that shows how orgasms improve your heart health and lower your risk of heart disease. And in Chinese medicine, that relationship between joy and the heart. And the opposite of a depressed state is a joyful state, and it literally improves our heart health and our emotional health at the same time. So beautiful.
It's good for every single thing. We should meditate, right? Well, getting into an arousal trance and having orgasms, same benefits. Yep. We should exercise. Same benefits. Have relationships and connection, and feel love and loved. All of these things we get from sex. So if it wasn't sex, the doctors would be writing prescriptions for it, right? Instead of writing prescriptions for antidepressants for Xanax. But so it's good for everything, and you don't have to have a partner. I just really want to emphasize that. Yeah. Your solo sex can give you all of those benefits, except obviously the partner connection thing. But you can get tremendous benefits, and I think some benefits that you don't get from partner sex in terms of self-love, self-care, and not just liberation, but feeling like you're having an amazing, awesome life. It's so empowering to feel like, hey, I can give myself this. I don't have to depend on a partner for this. And of course, if we are in intimate partnered relationships, then it's great for our relationships. Right? We need that. I think of sex as the glue and the lubricant of long-term relationships, both of which we need.
Yeah.
Right? So it's good for everything. And then that idea that it's a skill set. It's not just some people are good at it and some people aren't, or some people just got shortchanged when they were giving out the orgasmic goodies. It's like, no, it's all learnable. You want to learn it, you can. You don't have to, but you can. And so wherever you are, you're not stuck there. It's just where you are, and you've been on a learning journey, and you can go on a conscious learning journey now and choose what you want to learn. And if you're going to choose what you want to learn, obviously, if you want to learn to speak French, go do that. I'm not saying you shouldn't learn other wonderful things. And if given the choices of things to learn, why not learn to have more pleasure, deeper, better arousal, and lots of orgasms? Because it's so good for you, for everything.
Yeah. And it really boosts people's self-confidence when they feel like they're a good lover. And, being a good lover is being able to experience not just what you do for your partner, but what you're able to experience in yourself, and how you know your body and how to use it in sex. So.
Yeah. And the high level skill when you get to really be a virtuoso is you can get turned on and be orgasmic from giving pleasure. Right. So for example, learning how to have an orgasm from giving a blowjob. Now, talk about a win-win situation, right? Everybody's happy then.
Yeah, or fingering someone. I remember
absolutely.
That I had a spontaneous body orgasm from someone else's orgasm. I felt through my, it was like through my body.
Yeah, because we can get into conjoined trance. And when we're in conjoined trance, it doesn't matter who's doing what to who. Everything is just expanding that trance. We literally, one of the amazing things about our brains and our hearts is that we can get synchronized with the state of another person. We have that ability. Our brains and our hearts actually send out energy, and this is science, by the way. This isn't woo-woo. This is science, and we can get into synchronized states. And when we're in that deep arousal trance with a partner, we get to the point where we're just in that same state. I call it a conjoined trance. And oh man, is it like the best?
So cool. So cool.
So cool.
Sheri, you're so cool. Where else can people find your material, your books, your courses?
So they can go to my website, which is intimatearts, that's plural, center.com. Center is spelled the American way. Intimateartscenter.com. You can also look for me, Sheri Winston, but you have to spell Sheri correctly, Sheri. Winston, I think you'll get. Like I said, I'm giving your attendees a free, it's about an hour and a half, I can't remember, online class, Orgasmic Abundance. But you can go to my website. I've got lots and lots of blog posts and some videos that you can read. Of course, my books. I've got my 2 books. You can get those, which I'm happy that if you do. And there's recorded online classes, which are just a short single session, and then there's courses. And the courses are usually 3, mostly 4-session, really dive deep. So like if you really want to get deep into the anatomy stuff,
yeah,
get the book and take the course. And
who
you
better
too
to learn from than you? You're. I mean, I did my Ph.D. in human sexuality. I've heard a lot of lectures, and the amount of knowledge you bring to the table, I mean, like it's powerful. Not just up here, but I can feel you transmitting it via the heart center too. Like I just had chills listening to you. So thank you so much for all of your work and for giving us your time today. And I'm excited for people to watch this and get to learn from you.
Well, I'm excited always to share this, and it's my pleasure. It's my mission. Mm-hmm. I just want more and more people to know what they've got and how to make it work great.
Totally. Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you everyone
for
joining us. And we'll see you at the next video. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.